Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going deep on a question that seems to be everywhere these days. Are we really on the brink of artificial general intelligence? AGI.
Yeah, it seems like just yesterday, this was all just sci-fi.
Exactly. And now we've got a mountain of articles and research all pointing in that direction. And our listener is definitely eager to make sense of it all, right?
Absolutely. And it's a big question. I mean, we're talking about AI that can learn and reason like we do, maybe even solve those problems we haven't been able to crack.
But of course, that opens up a whole other can of worms. Like, what does that even mean for humanity?
Right, like what does it even mean to be human if machines can think like us? But I think even before that, we need to define what we even mean by AGI.
It's true. So how about we start there? Like, what is AGI really?
Well, it's definitely not the AI we're seeing every day. Like take AlphaGo.
Oh, yeah, that was incredible. Beating a world champion at Go.
Exactly. Amazing at Go. But can it write a poem? Compose a
Yeah.
symphony?
Not a chance. So AGI is more like us,
Right.
able to learn and adapt across all sorts of areas.
Exactly. And that's why everyone's so excited about large language models, LLMs.
Ah, yes. LLMs like ChatGPT, right? They
Yep.
can write code, translate languages, even compose music. That's what's got everyone talking about AGI again.
Yeah, they seem to be showing that breadth of ability, more like humans.
I've played around with ChatGPT, and it really is wild what it can do. So are LLMs like a stepping stone to AGI?
hmm
Or is that getting ahead of ourselves?
Well, they've definitely blown past what we thought AI could do. But whether they're on the road to AGI, that's a debate that's raging right now. To really understand it, we need to know how they work.
Okay, let's get technical. Lay it on me. How do these things work?
So at their core, LLMs are built on neural networks. Imagine layers upon layers of connected nodes, almost like a huge web of artificial neurons, right?
Yeah, okay, I can kind of picture that.
And these networks are trained on just massive amounts of data, text, code, you name it. And they basically learn to predict the next word in a sequence.
Like a super-powered autocomplete.
Exactly. And the more data they gobble up, the better they get at predicting. And that translates into all these amazing abilities. But what's key here is the transformer architecture.
A transformer. Okay, now you're losing me.
Basically, it lets the LLM understand relationships between words, even if they're far apart in a sentence. It's how they grasp all the nuances of language and write stuff that sounds, well, human.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But some of the articles you sent in point out the limitations of LLMs. I mean, they're impressive, sure, but are they really on the path to becoming truly intelligent?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. Take OpenAI's latest model, O1 preview.
I've heard of that one.
So it actually managed to solve 83% of the problems on a math Olympiad exam, which is incredible, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's insane.
But there's more and more evidence that just making LLMs bigger and feeding them more data, well, it might not be enough to reach AGI.
So what's missing then? What's holding them back?
One researcher, Francois Chalet, argues that they struggle with abstract reasoning, like applying knowledge to brand new situations, which is kind of a big deal for human intelligence.
Oh, interesting.
So he designed this visual puzzle test. The AI had to figure out how to stack blocks to reach a target height, but even the most advanced LLMs couldn't crack it consistently.
Huh. So are they just like really sophisticated parrots then? Not actual thinkers.
That's a great way to put it. And here's another potential problem. We might actually be running out of data to train these massive models. So if that's true, there might be a limit on how much they can actually develop, at least with the current approach.
Okay, well, that is kind of a scary thought. It feels like we're standing on the edge of something huge, but there are still some pretty massive gaps.
Definitely.
So if just making LLMs bigger isn't the answer, what else is needed to get to true AGI?
Well, one idea that keeps popping up is that AI needs to build what's called a world model.
A world model. Okay, what's that?
It's like an internal representation of their surroundings, almost like a mental map.
Okay, so kind of like how our brains create maps of our environment.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel. Are researchers actually seeing signs of that happening?
Oh, there are definitely some clues out there. Like researchers at MIT, they found that some LLMs actually develop internal representations of places, like the United States or even New York City.
Really?
Yeah, after being trained on data about those locations, it's like they're forming some kind of mental picture, not just words.
Wow, that's kind of freaky. But how do we know if these world models are even accurate? Are they like reliable maps? Or more like AI hallucinations?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Turns out these AI-generated maps, well, they can be pretty wonky.
Okay, how?
So there was this one study where they trained a model to predict taxi routes in New York,
Okay.
and it was crazy accurate, almost perfect. But get this, when they looked at the actual map the AI had created to make those predictions, it was a complete mess.
What? Like streets going in the wrong direction, buildings in impossible places?
Exactly, like a totally scrambled Manhattan. But the AI was navigating it just fine.
That is both fascinating and terrifying.
Right. It shows that even if these models can ace certain tasks, their internal picture of reality, well, it doesn't necessarily match up with ours.
So maybe we're not as close to AI truly understanding the world as we think.
Maybe not. And that brings us to another key ingredient that might be missing: feedback.
Feedback. Okay, help me out here. How does feedback fit into all of this?
Well, think about how our brains work. We've got these constant feedback loops between different areas. That helps us refine our understanding, fix mistakes, guide our actions.
Right?
But LLMs, for all their awesomeness, they don't really have that kind of robust internal feedback.
So they're just taking in information but not really, like, thinking about it
Yeah.
or refining their understanding?
Yeah, kind of. And one researcher, Dilip George, thinks this lack of feedback is a major roadblock on the path to AGI.
Interesting.
He says we need AI with much more complex architectures that allow for those feedback loops to emerge.
So almost like trying to reverse engineer the human brain, but in code.
Exactly.
Do we even understand our own brains well enough to do that?
That's a huge question, and we definitely have a long way to go. But there's some really cool research happening. For instance, neuroscientist Carl Friston, he thinks that giving AI systems agency, the
Yes.
ability to actually choose what information to learn from and how to interact with the world around them,
Yep.
that could be the key. That could make them way more efficient learners.
So instead of passively soaking up data, they'd have a more active role, like they're curious and want to learn.
Exactly. And this ties into the idea of internal simulations. Like, what if AI could generate its own data by running these simulations? Testing out different ideas in their minds. That would be way more powerful than just relying on the data we feed them.
Yeah, that would be a game changer. But it's also kind of scary, right? Like, what if AI gets too good at simulating and starts, I don't know, predicting things it shouldn't, or even manipulating things in the real world based on its simulations?
It's true. Those are some serious concerns. But I think it's important to remember that right now, we're still talking about very early stages of research. The focus is on making sure AI stays aligned with human values and goals.
So it's not about stopping progress. It's about proceeding cautiously and making sure we don't create something we can't control.
Exactly. Researchers are already looking into ways to build safeguards into AI systems, things like kill switches or ethical guidelines baked right into how they make decisions.
So almost like a moral compass for AI, like Asimov's laws of robotics, but for the real world.
Yeah, that's the general idea. Although it's way more complex than just programming in a set of rules. We're talking about creating AI that can understand human values and make ethical choices. And that's a really, really tall order.
It's like trying to teach a computer right from wrong.
Yeah.
And even we humans struggle with that sometimes.
Exactly. And that leads to another question. Who gets to decide what those ethical guidelines are? It's not a decision that should be left to just tech companies, right? Or governments. We need a much wider conversation across all of society about the values we want to see in AI.
It's definitely not just a tech problem anymore. It's a philosophical one. And it has huge consequences for the future of humanity.
Yeah, it really is a lot to wrap our heads around.
Speaking of which, one of the articles mentioned this idea of emergent properties. Like AGI might not be something we program directly, but something that just pops up unexpectedly from all these interacting AI parts.
Yes, emergent properties. That's a really fascinating area. It all comes down to complexity theory.
Complexity theory. Fill me in.
So basically, the idea is that when you have tons of interconnected elements like neurons in the brain or artificial neurons in a network, well, new properties can emerge, properties that weren't there in the individual parts.
So it's like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. Like, think of a flock of birds, right?
Right.
Each bird follows simple rules, but the flock as a whole, well, it's a completely different story. All those complex swirling patterns, dodging predators. Some researchers think AGI might emerge in a similar way, arising from the interactions of many simpler AI agents.
That's both amazing and unsettling.
Yeah.
Like, we might not even fully understand how AGI comes about. or how to control it once it's here.
That's definitely a valid concern. And it underlines the need for careful monitoring and analysis of these systems as they get more and more sophisticated. We need to be able to spot these emergent properties and understand them before they potentially become a risk.
It really does feel like we're standing on the precipice of something truly revolutionary, but also potentially dangerous. So what are the stakes here? What could actually happen if AGI becomes a reality?
Well, the possibilities are huge, right? Like, imagine AI helping us tackle climate change or designing personalized medicine. It could revolutionize almost every aspect of our world.
It's like having a superpowered brain working with us to solve the problems that have stumped us for centuries.
Exactly. But we'd be remiss not to talk about the potential downsides, too. You know, one of the articles you sent featured Yoshua Bengio.
Oh yeah, he's a leading AI researcher, right?
Yeah. And he cautions against the possible misuse of AGI. Like, what if it falls into the wrong hands?
Okay, yeah, that's the big fear, isn't it? Like AI turning against us, using its power for harm. It's like every sci-fi movie ever made.
Well, it's not just science fiction anymore. As AI gets more powerful, it's a real concern. What if it's used to develop autonomous weapons or create really sophisticated propaganda to manipulate people?
It's a pretty chilling thought,
Yeah.
and it underlines why we need to think about the ethical implications right now. We can't just focus on making it smarter. We've got to make sure it's used for good.
Absolutely. And control is a huge part of that. How do we make sure AGI stays aligned with human values? How do we prevent it from becoming so intelligent that we lose the ability to understand or manage it?
It's like the ultimate fear, right? AI becoming self-aware and deciding that humans are the problem. Easy to dismiss as fiction, but as we get closer to AGI, well, those questions become more and more relevant.
Definitely. But it's not about giving into fear or stopping research. It's about proceeding carefully. A lot of researchers are exploring ways to build in safeguards, like kill switches or ethical guidelines that are actually coded into the AI's decision-making process.
So almost like a moral compass for AI, like Asimov's laws of robotics, but for the real world.
Yeah, something like that. But it's much more complicated than just programming in a few rules. We're talking about AI that understands human values and can make ethical choices. It's a huge challenge, and honestly, there's no guarantee we'll be successful.
It's like trying to teach a computer right from wrong, something that even humans haven't quite figured out.
Exactly. And that brings up another tricky question. Who gets to decide what those ethical guidelines even are? It's not a decision that should be made just by tech companies.
Or government.
Right. It needs to be a much broader conversation involving all of society about the values we want to see reflected in AI.
It's way beyond just a technical issue, isn't it? This is philosophy, ethics. It's a huge deal for the future of humanity.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here? I mean, some experts are saying AGI is right around the corner. Others think it's decades away. What's the bottom line?
Honestly, it's impossible to say for sure. AI is a rapidly evolving field. Breakthroughs happen all the time that no one predicts. But AGI isn't a finish line, it's more of a spectrum. We might see AI gradually displaying more and more human-like intelligence over time.
So maybe the question isn't if AGI will happen, but when and in what form.
Exactly, and that highlights why ongoing research, dialogue, and collaboration are so critical to ensuring that AGI benefits all of humanity.
Well, I think we've definitely given our listener a lot to ponder today. It's been an amazing deep dive into the world of AGI. Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. We've talked about all the technical and ethical challenges. But what about the even bigger picture? If we create machines that can think and learn like us, what does that mean for our understanding of consciousness, of intelligence, of what it means to be human?
That's a question philosophers have grappled with for ages, right? And AI is forcing us to confront it head on.
It's almost like we're holding a mirror up to ourselves, trying to understand what makes us human by creating these artificial versions of ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's not just a scientific pursuit. The quest for AGI is a journey of self-discovery, an exploration into the very nature of intelligence and consciousness.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us and for sending in such thought-provoking material. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.